The world doesn't think that the gospel can change your life, but we know that it can. And that's why we want you to hear these stories of transformation, stories of freedom, people getting free from sin and healed from sin because of Jesus. This is Death to Life.
There were 2 sets of bunk beds in my brother's room, so I would sleep in the 4th bunk. And my dad came home that night and went into my room, and I wasn't there. And he was very drunk, and his mind immediately went to, she's not home, she's out with that guy. And so this experience blew up, and just that night was just awful. I think it was probably the first time I experienced actually feeling like depressed. Because it was just like this person in your life that's like one of the most important figures, and it's like you're just scared.
Yo, welcome to the Death to Life podcast. My name is Richard. Today's episode is with Eden, and I have never met her in real life. She's just been coming to these Bible studies, and I've seen such a beautiful growth in her, and I needed to know the story. So I messaged her. I said, "What's the story?" And so we recorded this podcast, and obviously there's some adult themes, so be careful there. But you're going to love to hear how God transforms. And that's what Eden's story is all about. So buckle up, strap in. This is Eden. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Where does this story start for you, Eden? Where does it start?
It starts for me, I think, around like 4 or 5. That's where I remember, at least, like, not even just my spiritual journey, but just in general, I feel like that's when my memories start to pop up in my head. So like 4 or 5, when I was little, I remember praying before bed, and I grew up in a Christian household. So, but I remember praying before bed, praying before meals. We always had family devotions. I was homeschooled, so that was a big part of my life as a kid. But I do remember, just in general, even though, like, I grew up in a Christian house, but the way that God was talked about was just in more of a, this is what we do, not necessarily this is why we do it. I didn't really understand like a personal relationship with Jesus, other than asking him into your heart, which is what most of us did as kids, or that was the extent of like what I knew about Jesus. So yeah, I grew up in a Christian household, and but what I saw at home, it didn't really, I couldn't reconcile it with what I heard at church or what we read in our devotions. And I don't really remember too much about church exactly, like nothing really specific. I just remember being in Sunday school, and like I went to a Presbyterian church, so we went to church on Sunday, and I remember Sunday school, remember learning the stories, singing the songs. But then at home, it just felt like a different environment. It wasn't, my mom was always very loving. She still is. She's just very sweet. But growing up, my dad was verbally abusive to my mom and physically to my mom. And then when I was around 4 or 5, it wasn't so much physical anymore, but it was just a lot of anger that my dad had. And so it really just, that is a big thing that stands out from that age. And my dad he was always a Christian, at least from the time that we were kids until now. Like, he's always been a believer, but I think he just had a lot of pain and hurt in his heart and just his own story, and it just came out on everyone around him. And so that's kind of where it started. And then, so we grew up going to church, and then my parents got divorced around, like, I don't know if I was 9 or 10. I can't exactly remember, but so around that time, my parents started going to 2 different churches. And also my mom had started working because my parents were divorced. And we were homeschooled at the time too. So my mom was homeschooling, and I have 3 siblings, 3 brothers. So she's homeschooling 4 kids, and she's working part-time, and we're going back and forth to churches. And I remember, I don't know for what reason, but my siblings and I, at least, I don't know. So I have 2 older brothers and 1 younger brother, and we're all 2 years apart. And so I think around that time when I was like 9 or 10, when my parents got divorced, my older siblings might have already gone through, like, we had a catechism class in church. And then when you got to a certain age, you could be dedicated to that church or become a member. And my brother, who's only 2 years older than me, he went through that whole thing. I think my oldest brother did too. But myself and my younger brother just decided, like, we're not going to go to Sunday school anymore. And I'm not sure why, but at this point, my mom was really just tired with everything, just worn out from life, working and homeschooling, and just, we were tough kids, and not in a good way. We made it really hard for her. And so we were just like, we're not going to Sunday school anymore. And so we just sat with her in church. But I remember, just like, I couldn't tell you one thing that I remember hearing, like, in a sermon or anything. I remember committing myself to not enjoying it. Like, if that makes any sense. I was like, I'm going to be miserable. This is going to be miserable. It was not something I liked or enjoyed necessarily. It just felt like, we have to do this. And, like, even same with...
Is this because you were angry or because you were sad, or?
Yeah, it might have been. It might have been. And even, like, before that, just what I experienced with my dad, I just know, like, it really shaped how I saw God. And if you learn about God primarily from people who don't act like what they're talking about, or, like, all you know about God is from those people. And when you're that age, unless you're having crazy God experiences at that age, it's not necessarily personal for everyone at that age. So you're just taking their word for it, but then you're experiencing their treatment of you. And so it's just like, okay, so then this is what God is like. And I know it's the same for a lot of people, and that's what it was for me. And so I don't know if it was just, I don't want to be at church because God has never done anything for me. I don't feel safe. But I just remember not enjoying it, because it really just felt like, we're doing this because we have to do this. And it was like, well, okay, is anyone going to tell me why? I just never really understood why, or that personal relationship aspect. And it was the same with, like, daily devotions. We would do them every morning since we were homeschooled. And I remember my mom we would all come out of into the living room. And I remember just being so grumpy as a kid. Like, I'm just going to tune this out. I don't want to listen. I don't want to hear these stories. And so my heart was just even as a young kid, like, and this was after my parents were divorced. It was probably around 9 or 10. But when I was younger, I remember as a kid, I used to get nightmares a lot, and I'd be really scared. I was scared of the dark. I remember going into my parents' room a lot. And I do have a vivid memory of, like, I knew Jesus was with me. Like, I knew God could see us. And, but I remember, I don't know if I had a bad dream or I just woke up from a bad dream or something, but I remember just, like, envisioning Jesus holding me, like, as a little girl, like, holding my hand. And I was like, I'm holding hands with Jesus right now. And it's just funny because it really was like that. Just that little bit of faith. Like, I knew Jesus was with me. I knew he was holding me. I knew, like, he was my safety in that moment. Even though, like, I don't know when I officially in my mind, like, concrete was like, Jesus is God, because it's like, that's a memory I have of Jesus, but God was scary growing up. I was very scared of hell. I was very scared of messing up and just doing wrong. And it's interesting because I was thinking back, and I was scared of hell, but I remember laying in bed at night, and I did this so many times, and I would just, like, imagine in my head eternity. And this isn't even hell. This is heaven. And I'm like, that almost sounds scary though. Like we just live forever and ever and ever and ever. And it's like, wow, that's really sad. Like those are thoughts of heaven, like eternity with God. But it's like, okay, well then I really didn't know who God was. If even the thought of living forever with God was scary to me, then I didn't know what it was like. I really didn't know him and his character.
It sounds like God was like a problem to be solved.
Hmm.
Like, so many people have this idea that their main problem is God, and they need to get their act together so God can be happy with them,
Yeah.
rather than their main problem being sin, and God actually sent Jesus to save you from sin. Like, God and Jesus aren't different. They are the same. They have the same goal. But if we don't understand God, we think he's the problem to be solved. And I need to get my act together so that I'll be like, I'm right with God. I need to make myself right with God, which you can't.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah, that's
religion
exactly
comes
it.
along and says kind of like, this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you fall for religion,
Yeah.
which is not it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was very focused on me. It was very, what can you do? And I also have this memory, and I don't know how old I was, maybe 7 or 8. And we watched a movie. I think it was a Christian movie or something, but there was a clip at the end of Rascal Flatts. And I don't know what song he was singing, but it might have been Amazing Grace. But I remember as a little girl, like it moved me, but I don't think it was maybe it was beautiful, but I said to my mom, I remember being like, why would he do it? Like, why would Jesus do something like that for me? And it's like, even at that age, like I just highly identified with the title of sinner. Like just as a little girl, just feeling like, why would I be worthy of him to die for me? And just like, that's crazy. I was 7 or 8. And I don't know what my mom said after that, but I just like, that could have been a really beautiful moment. Like, wow, Jesus did that for me. But it was like, why? Why would he do it for me? Like, and I remember I was bawling my eyes out.
Wow.
Yes.
Did you come up with a reason?
Oh, no. Nope.
No.
It wasn't love. And that also is me focused. That's very just like, I didn't like, and it's the point is I didn't do anything. He did it because he loved me, but I'm like, why would he do it for me? Like, I'm rotten. I don't know. I'm a rotten 7-year-old. Yeah.
Hmm. So did that fear of hell, did that motivate you to behave yourself, or was that just a scary thing?
It was just a scary thing. I think if anything, my behavior, and I don't think I was a really bad kid, but, um, growing up, like my dad worked at home for a period of time, and I just remember like if my dad was home working, we had to be quiet upstairs, we had to behave, or if in a season where he wasn't working from home, when he would come home, it was just like, okay, you just like don't make dad mad. And that was kind of what it was. So it was like hell was scary, but my behavior was more just because I didn't want to make my earthly father upset. Because then you were going to get yelled at. And it wasn't just like, I don't know, just basic yelling. It was like really scary. I just remember it was really scary. So I felt scared a lot, and I didn't necessarily feel safe, even with my dad home. Because then when my parents got divorced, my dad didn't live at home. And I had this strong association with mom's house is safe, dad's house is scary. We just got to make it through till we can come back home. And there was a long time I didn't call my dad's house home either. I remember that, like, just mom's house was home, dad's house was dad's house. And at dad's house, you were a completely different child. Like, everything was perfect. And at mom's house, my poor mom, like, she's got 3 boys and a really rebellious daughter. and she's just trying to manage working, homeschooling, all the things, and she couldn't control all of us. So really, it was pretty chaotic. It was a very different experience on both sides. And then we're going to 2 different churches every other weekend. And this was probably like around the age 11 or 12. And it was just, it was chaotic. It wasn't very peaceful.
So what happened after that? You're getting into high school?
Yeah. So I asked to be put in public school. And this was mainly because like I said, my mom was working, and so our school structure at home was like non-existent. And I don't know what part of me was thinking like I need some structure, but it was bad enough that like I could hide my own textbooks if I wanted to and then just not do that subject. I'm talking about math for like 2 months if I wanted, because, I don't know where the book is. And so it was just really bad. And then I think, so when I was like 12 that summer, I begged my mom to be put in public school, which if you're homeschooled, or at least if you know homeschooled people, usually they wouldn't do that. Because I know a lot of people who have just had incredible homeschooling experiences, and I did enjoy my experience, but there was just a lot about it that, like, my mom did the absolute best she could, and she was amazing at what she did, but it was bad. I needed more structure and more discipline. So then I did go into public school, and actually, like, around that age, so I was 12 and then I turned 13 my freshman year. And I actually knew quite a few people going into high school because we lived in a pretty small town. So like we would hang out with the kids from town. And so I knew people, and that helped because it wasn't quite as scary, like, oh, I don't know anybody. And all my friends wanted me to come into public school too. So that also really, like, because that's the age I'm getting into, like, making more friends, and depending on the friends you have could determine if you're cool or not. And so it was like high school, that could be a thing. And also just, whatever you saw on TV or on movies, it's like I wanted whatever that experience was that I saw and what I heard my friends talking about in middle school. I wanted that experience. And so around that age, like I said, we started hanging out with people who went to our local high school, and we didn't have much supervision. My mom always worked second shift, so she was gone usually by like 2 or 3 p.m. until like 11 at night. And so we would like do our laundry, make our own, like make SpaghettiOs, and just, I don't know, we would just do our thing. But we would hang out with kids a lot. And there was this one girl I was friends with, and she went to the high school, but she was cyber schooled. She was a couple years older than me. And so even though she was affiliated with that high school, she was home. And while I was still homeschooled, I would go over and hang out with her. And at that time, if I was like 12, she would have been like 14 or 15, but she smoked cigarettes, smoked pot. And I remember, like, the first time ever smoking a cigarette, I was way too young. And so I just started to like wonder about this stuff. And I didn't mention, like, growing up, my dad was very heavily into alcohol. And he was just always out at the bar ever since he married my mom. And so that was always something, like, I had it in my mind, and I didn't like the idea of it, but I never wrote it off. Like, you hear some people, if they had a parent who dabbled in stuff, they'll be like, I'm never going to do that. Or I don't want to be like my parent that did that. And I never really wrote it off. I had more of a curious attitude about it, I guess. And just like this affinity for like bad things and bad people. And I don't know if it just had to do with the adrenaline or just this like rebellion or what it was. But it just really drew me. And so I'm in public school, and I'm hanging out with some good kids and some bad kids, but I really just started to develop this need for affirmation. And need for acceptance. And it's like, on one hand, I wanted to be rebellious. And then on the other hand, I needed to do my homework and study for tests. And I would strive to do well. And freshman year was really hard because that was a transition out of homeschooling with little to no structure. And so it was a big adjustment for me. And I remember going into my Algebra 1 class, and the teacher gave us a paper, and it was like, okay, these are some problems. I want to see where you're at so that I can just figure out where everyone's going to be for this math class starting out. Okay. I look at this page. I'm like, this is foreign. This is very basic Algebra 1. And I turned the page over and I wrote a paragraph for the teacher to read. And it said something like, I was homeschooled. I have no idea what any of this is. Blah, 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 blah. And then I was so embarrassed, I erased it. So then you just see this paragraph that was written and then erased. And he's walking around looking at people's papers and he's like, what's up? And he was the best teacher ever. I had him again when I was a senior because I had to drop that math class and start even more basic. But so that first year was a big adjustment, and some of the classes, like I started out more ambitious in like a higher biology class and a more advanced literature class. And then I had to drop them because I was like, okay, thought I was going to be okay here, but I'm not. And so sophomore year, I felt more acquainted. But oh man, just poor little me in sophomore year. I think, so I started out, I was 14 in sophomore year, but then I turned 15 later that year. And like the attention of boys, it just consumed me. I just needed the attention of boys, and just, it was always like, oh, I heard that guy talking about you, or this guy said that about you, or just whatever. I was just so focused on having a boyfriend. And then I actually did start dating someone when I was like 15, and did stuff that I didn't want to do necessarily. And I remember even thinking, if I don't do it, then I'm not going to have this person tell me these nice things. They're not going to necessarily want me like they say they do. And so it was just, okay, I'm going to do it. And I remember feeling like instantly very shameful, very guilty, like, okay, there's no going back now. This is who I am. And it was a very personal, like, I'm that person. And the crazy thing is, like, a few years before that, my mom gifted me a purity ring for Christmas. And like, I still wore it, and it's not like it matters. It's not like it really means anything. It's just a symbol, and but anyway, like, I remember just wearing it and being like, this doesn't mean anything. Like, I'm not pure. Like, I'm dirty. So yeah, it was pretty messy. I still just really sought that affirmation of guys and my teachers. Like, I loved when they'd ask a question and I got it right. And like, I had friends in high school, like, I think a good amount of friends, but there were a lot of people who were my friend because they could ask me what the homework was, and I would show them my paper. And I didn't mind it. I a part of me did, because I'm like, I would talk to my closer friends about it later, like, oh, they just use me for my homework. But in the moment, it was like, oh yeah, like, here's my homework, copy off of me. I don't care. And like, but then they would do it again. And so it was like this feedback loop that I kind of liked, but kind of didn't like. I knew it wasn't like a genuine friendship. So I needed that from teachers. And I really liked that. And I just remember, like, I tried hard in school, I would say, but even though I tried, like, and I got okay grades, but for someone who studied a lot and did all their homework and paid attention and like needed to do well in a sense, I didn't do like the best. I wasn't like a straight A student. Like, I would get C's and B's. And I think it was like this striving even just for acceptance by teachers and stuff. But then, and I still think, like, because I took it more seriously than the kids who literally didn't care and they were just there because they had to be, like, there still was this appreciation from teachers, but like, it was like, man, and this went all the way through college, like, man, I really tried, but like, I still got this, and it was never good enough. Like, getting a B wasn't good enough. An A is what you were going for, or an A plus. And sometimes I got them, sometimes I didn't, but I just remember that was a big part. Like, high school was like boys and trying to get good grades. And then so we were still going to two churches. And
with this guy that you was this a boyfriend, or was this just like
he was
whatever?
For like 2 years. For like 2 years. Yeah.
Did that fuse together the relationship in a good way, in a bad way? Did it just bring more guilt and shame?
Yeah, it was really bad. It was, and we broke up like one time and then got back together. And even in that relationship, like towards the end of the relationship, I started hanging out with like the best friend of the guy I was dating, and just like, I just kept seeking affirmation even outside of my relationship. And I remember being like, man, this is not good enough. Like, I need more of this. And I did that in several relationships, even relationships that I wouldn't consider to be like a part of my life, like even small relationships. And I just remember, if I was in a relationship, because I was in a few before that one that lasted like 2.5 years, and they were much shorter, but I would like have these intense feelings and this infatuation. And then when it would fade, I'd be like, oh no, is it happening again? And I'm like, it was almost like, okay, this thing is really fulfilling me right now. And then just very quickly, it was like, wait, but now I need something else. Like, it was just, yeah, it was a lot. I was really seeking that.
That sounds tough.
Yeah. So then in high school,
what did you want to do with your life?
I just wanted to be successful, whatever that meant. I just wanted to be successful. We never had like a crazy amount of money, and my dad grew up really poor, so he was always saying to us, like, you need to go to school, you need to do well, you need to get a job, you need to work to be successful. And it's like, some people have parents that might instill that in them, and that's like, it's a good thing. But the way it was said to us was very fearful. Like, if you don't do this, you're not going to have enough. Or if you don't do this and you're not successful, like, that's the worst thing possible. And so I just remember, and I don't know if this is why I wanted to go into public school, if I was already thinking about that, but I was gonna just go to school to get a 2-year degree. It was the same degree my mom had in medical laboratory science. And it was just a 2-year degree, but you could make like pretty good money. And that was my plan, because, okay, I could go to school for 2 years, do something I'm semi-interested in, which is science related, and then make good money. And then after that, I don't know. That was my plan, even from the get-go, like even when I was a freshman, just because my mom, like, she really enjoyed her job, but she tried to get all of us to go to school for it. But the reason was like, you can do this and you can make pretty good money for just 2 years of school. And we could just do that at our local community college in Reading, Pennsylvania. So that, as far as my 5-year plan goes, that was what it was. It was just go to school, get that degree, and then just work with that degree and make money.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens next?
Well, so I want to backtrack a little, because
Sure.
So when I was like 13, we were staying at my dad's house one weekend, and there was just this big episode. Just like just my dad had a temper, and so I don't know what set it off. It could be anything. It could be very little, but I just remember he exploded over something, and it was just really scary at that time. And I felt trapped because we were at my dad's house. It was only 30 minutes away, but I couldn't drive. So I felt like I was stuck there. And it was just scary. I remember being like, I just want to leave. And so after that period, I didn't see my dad for like 3 months. And cause I told my mom, I'm like, I can't do it. Like, I'm not going to see him. I was like, for what reason? And the reason that we had to was always because the court said so. And so in high school, I even struggled sometimes because, like, if I wanted to go to a football game, but it was on a night my dad was supposed to have us, then it was always like this fear that, oh man, I have to ask my dad if I can go. And he's going to want to see me because he only sees me a couple times a week. But it was just like, why would I go be there? Like, why would I go stay at my dad's house? I feel like I'm trapped there when I could just go hang out with my friends. And then a similar thing actually happened in high school where, and I was with that guy I was with for 2.5 years during this period. And, I had hung out with him on a weekend that I was with my dad, but he met my dad. So it was like planned, and he came and picked me up and we saw a movie or something. And it was like right around my dad's house. And so this was planned, and then he came back and dropped me off, whatever. But my dad was out that night. And he always had girlfriends on and off, and that was hard for us as kids, meeting a new person, because you'd get attached and then they would break up and then they were just gone. And like a lot of them were really nice women, but they would all kind of leave for the same reason. And it was because it was hard to be with my dad. And then, so he was out, and he came back really late one night. I don't know if it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I used to sleep in my brother's room because I had always been scared of the dark from being a little kid. So like even high school. And we used to watch a lot of scary movies, which I do not watch anymore, praise God. But I don't know what it was. It was like addiction to the fear or something. So I didn't want to sleep in my own room. And there were 2 sets of bunk beds in my brother's room. So I would sleep in the 4th bunk. And my dad came home that night and went into my room, and I wasn't there. And he was very drunk, and his mind immediately went to, she's not home, she's out with that guy. And so this experience blew up, and just that night was just awful. And I'm not going to necessarily recount all the details, but it was just very traumatic. And just for my siblings and I, and we were actually, I think one of my brothers wasn't there at the time, but my oldest brother and I were like, okay, like I've just had it. We were at this age where it was like my oldest brother probably was 18, or maybe he was 18, and he would still visit, though he didn't technically have to. We had to until we were 18. We had no choice. And so we were at the age where I decided, like, okay, we're grown. I was 15, but I'm grown enough to understand, like, this isn't okay. And so I told my mom again, I am done seeing dad. And I don't know how long it was for, but I just remember it was hard. And that first time it happened when I was like 13, that was like 3 months that I think it was probably the first time I experienced actually feeling like depressed. Because it was just like this person in your life that's like one of the most important figures. And it's like, you're just scared. And so I didn't want anything to do with my dad for a while. And then it happened again, like I said, in high school. And so I was still with this guy, and I started having like some stomach issues. And I'm not going to really go into this, but like I would get nauseous in the morning a lot. And my dad would talk on the phone with my mom about some, just stuff, because they're trying to manage 4 kids, but they're just don't get along at all. And he said something like, is my daughter pregnant? Or just, he just had, you could tell it was from a place of like, I don't know, love, because like he does love me, and he always told us, no matter what, he always told us that he loved us, and he was affectionate, but it just was confusing with the behavior. Mm-hmm. But he didn't want that for me. He wanted good things for me. He didn't want me to be pregnant at 15 and just have a really hard time trying to figure things out. And so I get that, but looking back, it was just like, of course he thinks that about me. Like he probably, he probably thinks the worst of me. And that he called me a name, which I can't remember, but I very much took it personally. And, you hear people get called something by a parent or a teacher or an authority figure, and whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. You take that with you. And I think I did, because it's like, okay, if I'm this person, then let me just go act like it. If that's all I am anyway, let me just go do that thing, because I'm nothing else than that. And so that was still in high school. And I think from then on, like, things really just got worse. Yeah.
You were just like, if this is what you think of me, maybe this is who I am, and just kind of went for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would
And
say
that
so.
didn't bring happiness, though. I'm not sure if it did. You tell me.
No. Um, no. Very, very temporary, at least, is what it seemed. But like, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things and like everything that I have now, it's like, no, that wasn't happiness in one bit. So at the end of high school, that guy I was with for 2.5 years, he broke up with me like a couple days after graduation. And I'm 17, and my beloved mother let me get a tattoo at 17. And it is cool, like, looking back, because it's not my favorite, but it's Ecclesiastes 3:11, which is everything is made beautiful in his time. And it's like, even though it doesn't look exactly how I'd want it to, it's just such a perfect verse just for life in general. Like,
Sure.
that verse speaks like death to life. Like,
Yeah.
everything is going to be made beautiful. And so I got the tattoo, I cut my hair off, I did all the things you do. It's like, okay, that's going to fix this broken heart, this rejection. And it didn't. But so the town I grew up in is pretty small. It's rural, but it is a college town. And so after high school, like, a couple of my friends I graduated with, we just really, really went into the party scene. And it was like, okay, maybe this will help. So I'm going to college. I'm start at this community college, and then I delve into this party scene, and just heavily every weekend. It's what I'm looking forward to. Just doing the school, just trying to get it over with so I can just get to the weekend. And it was just like, it was such a miserable way to live. It was a cycle. And at this point, like, I had started to develop like a love-hate relationship with alcohol, because like, I hated it. I hated what it did to my dad. I hated what it did to like certain people around me. But like, I couldn't stop going and partying on the weekend and using it. So it was like, oh, I hate this thing. And then it was like, oh, okay, but I'm going to use this thing. So it was like, I didn't even put up a fight. I didn't even try. And so I would just be blacked out on the weekend. And I did some really embarrassing, really humiliating things. And it's like, it was just normal to everyone. And I remember thinking sometimes in my head, like, does everyone else like, cause I longed for more, and I knew there was more. This whole time, I had even known, like, if I ask God, and this is what I thought, if I ask him, I know he'll forgive me if I ask, because he has to.
Mhm.
But it was like, so I knew he was there, but he was very disappointed in me. And it was very like prodigal son. Like, if I really need something and I go back, like, he'll be there for me. So it was like, I understood that, but I was abusing grace in a sense. I'm just like living it up because I know that forgiveness is there for me. But it was just absolutely miserable. So I met this guy who graduated from my high school a couple years before me. And this started another 2.5 year long relationship, but he was even more into the party scene than me, and it brought me even deeper into it. And then I was hanging out with kids who went to my high school that I saw as like a freshman and a sophomore. Oh, those are the cool kids. So then I'm like in this group with the cool kids, and now I'm like, wow, this is like, it's like what I always wanted, but it was just horrible. It was such a lie. And so that relationship was very toxic, and just, I was drinking every weekend, but this person I was with, it consumed him. And then it started to make me really mad. And I just started to despise the party scene. And I'm like, this is just like, I knew it was a cycle. I knew it was endless. It was going to keep going. You were going to need it again. And it was awful. So we were together for a couple years. And then in freshman year of
When
college,
did you know you're like, this isn't going to happen? We're just here for a good time, not a long time.
I think I knew it deep down, even when I kept continuing on with it, because I didn't know what else there was. And like, so I was in college, but like I said, after getting my degree and maybe just working using that degree, like I had no other plans. Even growing up, like in high school, there was a long time where I feared having kids, and I feared birth, and, feared being a mother. I didn't want to be a bad mother. And this was even when I was young. So there was a long time where I wrote that off, but I don't necessarily think, like in high school with that boyfriend I was with a couple years, we talked about having kids and stuff. So it was like, maybe in the future, maybe I'd be a mother at some point, maybe I'll get married. But, like, after college, after degree, no plans. I'm just in college, just having a good time. So I'm dating this guy in this cycle, but in freshman year at college, I met my husband. And I just met him in this computer class, IFT 110. And I'll just never forget, like when he walked in, I'm like, cause this guy I was with, he was like, when I think about it, which I never had thought about it then, like, oh, do I have a type? But whether I had one or not, that guy was not my type. Like, everything he was not what I wanted. And so when my husband walked in that room, I'm like, oh, wow. I was like, that guy's pretty cool. Like, oh, he looks pretty cool. He dressed pretty cool. I see a little cross keychain on his backpack, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if he's a Christian. And then, so there's that moment. I'm in class.
So at this point, sorry for interrupting you. At
No,
this
it's
point,
fine.
you still consider yourself a Christian?
Yeah. Yeah. I never was like, I'm an atheist. God, I'm done with you. There was just a time like in high school when I was with that guy, and me and my dad were having some tension, and there was a time where I just decided to stop going to church, but it wasn't necessarily like, it was more like, I'm not going to be going to church because I'll probably be hungover. But it was not, God, I'm done with you, and you did nothing for me. I don't believe in you anymore. So I still would tell, like, every now and then it would come up in a conversation. Actually, like when I was drunk, I loved talking about it with people, because when people are drunk, they get really philosophical and but I didn't know what I believed, really. Like, I just, at that age, was just like, it sounds so bad, and it really is, but it was like, God, you can just wait on the back burner. Like, I'm gonna just do whatever I want. And so, yeah. So, and then I met my husband, and he just was the sweetest person I ever met. And we just talked a little bit because he was just a guy in my class. But I remember like coming home and telling my mom, like, wow, I met this really nice guy at school, and he's a Christian, and he's just so kind. And I even told my one brother, who I'm close with all my siblings, but just me and my middle brother, because we're the middle two, I would just tell him everything. And I told him about this guy, and he's like, yeah, but aren't you dating someone? Because he was always a little bit more like, I don't mean say this to be mean, but he was more pious. And so I was like, yeah, but we were just talking like friends. Like, he was just really nice. And so that that started to put into my mind, like, wow, what could dating a Christian guy look like? Like, someone who has their life together, who loves the Lord. Because I'm like, what does that mean for me? Because I started thinking about, okay, I told this guy, oh, I'm a Christian too. And he has a little cross tattoo on his wrist, and I have my tattoo. And I'm like, oh, we both have a Christian tattoo. But it's like, I don't know what it means to be a Christian. I don't know what it means to be a relationship with Jesus. I don't know everything that I have in him. And so it was appealing because he was very kind. He had his head on his shoulders. He, he just loved Jesus. He was very open about it. And like, I'll never forget, this guy in our class was playing some online like game, not paying attention. We're in the back of the room, and he keeps saying like, Jesus Christ, just over and over. And my husband, I always get it wrong. He's like, that's not what I said. But he said something like, do you know Jesus? Or something like that. Or, dude, do you even know Jesus? And he was just very like unapologetic about it. And that was just so appealing to me. So that's kind of where that ends. I meet my husband. That's the fall semester, the beginning semester. And then the semester's over. But before that, he walked me to my car in the parking lot, and he asks me a question that 17-year-old me is very offended. He's like, so when are you going to break up with your boyfriend? And I'm like, excuse me? Like, what? And so I just said, I don't know. And then that was kind of that, like, for a year. So I'm still dating this guy. I'm just in this cycle. And
why did he want to know that? Because he wanted to date you, or he knew it wasn't going well?
Yeah. Because he liked me.
Bold move.
Yes, he's very bold.
I like it.
Around that time, he had also had a dream about me, and he's just always been like, he grew up in a family who moved in the prophetic, and I had never heard anything about that growing up. Like the Holy Spirit was there, and he would help you, and that was maybe the extent of that. So he, like, I don't remember if he told me about that dream later. I think it was later, but he had a dream at that time when I was just going off, doing whatever I wanted. Like, he knew that I was supposed to be his wife. So he was like very low key pursuing me as soon as after those few months. But I'm just like so in love with this guy, like, just because we had broken up once, and actually I broke up with him for my now husband, but that lasted 2 weeks. And I hung out with my husband, Jonathan. We hung out for a little bit. And then this is where, when I was in high school, and I mentioned when I was in a relationship and I'd be like on this high of emotion and feelings, when it would start to slow down, I started to get really fearful. And I'm like, oh no, is this thing going to last? Is this going to sustain me? Is this going to give me what I'm looking for? And then I would get really scared, and I would break up with someone. And then I would look for something else. And so that sounds really
You're like, is this thing going to last? Nope, I'm done. I'm out.
Pretty much. Yeah. And so I did that in college. I broke up with that guy I met from the town I'm from. And I started talking to my husband, and we just hung out for like 2 weeks. He wrote me a song on piano for my birthday and sent it to me on my birthday, because my birthday is just a couple days after Christmas. And he sent it to me. But before I broke up with my boyfriend at the time, I was texting him a little bit, my husband. And obviously, if you're dating someone and they're texting some other person, not cool. So that guy hated Jonathan, and he actually knew, because I had met him in college. He knew that I met him. There was nothing there, but he just was like, oh, like, who's this Jonathan guy? And he always called him John. And like, my husband does not go by John. So it was just funny. He didn't like him for obvious reasons. Like, it's not like it was okay, but in my mind, it's like, this guy is terrible. This guy is really awesome. So I'm going to talk to him, because I was miserable in that relationship, but I didn't want to leave it. And I had before, but I had gone back to it. So I broke up with that guy, and I talked to my husband we hung out a couple times, and then he sent me a song on my birthday, and I was like, wow, that is like a beautiful song. He just sat down on a piano in the church he went to and just played it. And he doesn't need music. He just will play. And I was like, that is like, it moved me. It really did. It was really special. And it was just really thoughtful. But I remember just being like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm dating someone. This feels so wrong. Like it is wrong because it technically was cheating on that guy in a way because
I thought you had broke. This wasn't when you guys had broken up.
You know what? So I think it was a very short period of time. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember. You know what? I think it was okay. So no, I would listen to that song after I got back together with him because we were apart for 2 weeks, and I kept listening to that song while I'm with this guy who I claimed, like, I'm never going to do it again. Like, I'm never going to break up with you again. Like, I love you. And it was like, no, I didn't. I really did not. Like, we codependently felt like we needed each other. There was not an ounce of love in that relationship. So I went on in that relationship for another year. Almost.
Nice.
Yeah. Smart. Great move. So like I had that very short.
I don't know what we're doing when we're like
it's
late teens, early 20s. We don't know what we're doing. How did we get out of there with like jobs and spouses and who knows?
It's incredible.
By the grace of God. That's the answer.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, in the summer of 2018, I start to ask myself those questions again. Like, okay, I say I'm a Christian. What does that even mean? What do I believe? I've never even read the Bible for myself. So I like almost did a 180. I get a Bible, start reading it like crazy, start reading a bunch of theologians and apologists. I get really into apologetics and stuff like that. But then I'm like, I want to know everything. Let me just know everything, all the religious things. And it was very much like, okay, God, I'm going to give you what you wanted, which is me, but it's because you want me to serve you and I'm here. What can I do now? What can I do? And so I went like full force into that, and things did get so much better, but it was still like half of the equation. Because I still had a lot of guilt and shame over things in my past. And so I break up with that guy. I'm not with that guy anymore. So anyway, I'm reading books, I'm reading my Bible. There's a Christian group at the local college, which I didn't go to that university. I went to a community college, but my brother went to the university and it was right up the road. So I would go with him, and we would go and, worship and have a message. And they also had a couple Bible studies you could attend. I even attended a Bible study on Romans, and it's like, he went through a lot of the stuff that like you hear in Love Reality, but the conclusion was different. It's like, this is amazing. This is everything Jesus has done. But there was an emphasis on the Romans 7 battle because that's still inherently like who you are. It's just going to be a fight. And I remember coming out of that Bible study and being like, wow, this is awesome. And then being like, I literally thought to myself, wow, this is just the Christian life. It's just really hard. And it's because I felt like I was struggling with that back and forth, the double-mindedness so much. And I'm like, to be honest, this kind of sucks. Like, because it didn't. It was like, this is hopeful, but is this it? Like, is that it? And then I just remember pondering that, and then I just continued on, and things were still better. Like, I wasn't drinking and I wasn't smoking, and I didn't want to. Like, those desires, like, I had hated it even when I was doing it. I knew it was stupid. I knew it was unhealthy. I knew it was like toxic, not good for me.
Did you get addicted to nicotine?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So But so from what I understand, that's the hardest to break. Did you
Yeah.
find that to be true?
No, not at least in that experience. And it almost had to be a supernatural thing because I just stopped smoking pot, I stopped smoking cigarettes, and I stopped drinking all at the same time. And I think after that, there were a couple times where I would just be like, oh man, I just really want to smoke a cigarette. And I would go buy a pack and then I would feel really stupid. And I'd be like, this tastes awful. Like, what was I doing? But I didn't feel like I had to fight against it or like, okay, I'll smoke half a pack today and then I'll, keep going down and stuff like that. I never really had to like break it off. It actually did just kind of like, it was like, I don't want to do this anymore and I'm not going to. And then that was that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so is this the Christian life is your question?
Yeah.
What do you got?
Yeah.
What did you decide? That was it?
Yeah. I was like, okay, this is what it says. This struggle is going to be mine. At least Paul can relate to me and everyone else who relates to Paul. We all just can relate to each other, that we're just going to fight against our flesh and we're never going to win. So it's like, okay, awesome. Like Jesus, it's like, it is finished. Cool. And then it's like, okay, so what do I have to do? It's like, it's done and then it's not. And so, I just, like, I couldn't get my behavior together still. I was still like just fighting really hard, trying really hard to just, and like I wasn't struggling necessarily with like those substances or addictions at this point, but like I would say I was mean. Like I was just mean. I was hurt. I still had hurt. I still had anger, just no patience, nothing like, and I still lived at home with all three of my siblings because like I said, the university was like a couple miles away. So we all lived at home.
So you were not struggling with the addictions, but you were struggling with just kind of being mean.
Yeah.
Anger.
Yeah. So I think I just kept trying to be better. Just kept trying to do better. I definitely had that concept of sanctification. Like it's something we're just always going to be trying to achieve. And it's the work of the Holy Spirit, but it's also very much the work of yourself and what you're going to do and how you're going to get there. And then Jesus comes back and then you're all of a sudden you caught up. Like all those standards and that you missed, they're all of a sudden fulfilled when Jesus comes back. But until then, like you just got to keep on trying, keep on going. So it was a lot of that. But I do think like I started to understand the concept of personal relationship with Jesus and just that the Holy Spirit can speak to you, because ever since I had met my husband, like I had never heard anyone talk about the Holy Spirit like he had. And it was just a very personal thing. So in the summer of 2018, I start asking God, because then I'm possibly considering, what would it be like to get married? Like to be with someone who actually loves the Lord now that I'm in this thing, now that I'm like actually doing what a Christian says they should do. So I start wondering like, I wonder what Jonathan's doing. And rewind to...
You guys weren't dating at this point?
So
you're like, I wonder if we should get married.
Yeah.
You're not even dating.
Honestly, that's not wrong. But no, so when I was still dating that guy, before I ever broke up with him, like 6 months, maybe longer, maybe like 8 months or something, Jonathan had let me know just to keep me in the loop. Because like I said, like he had been considering this since he met me in 2016. And I think he emailed me because he wasn't about to text me. He knew I was dating this guy. If he would see it, that'd be bad. But he's just like, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm moving across the country. I'm leaving. And he's always had family here, so he just had the resources and he just was like, I think I'm done with Reading and I want to change of pace. And so I'm like, okay, cool. That helps me because he's completely out of sight, out of mind. He's across the country. Like, that's it. And so then fast forward again to like 8 months later, and it's the summer. I'm like, okay, now I'm really a Christian because I read my Bible, and now I'm really saved because I go to church again and all the things. And then I'm like, like, I wonder what he's doing, like, over there in Arizona. I don't know what I thought. But I literally just asked the Lord, I'm like, where is he? And I knew he was in Arizona. It was like, I'm going to ask the Lord a rhetorical question. And within a couple days, I checked an email I never checked before, like, or at that time, it was like an old email and I didn't really use it. It was the email I gave him because when I had talked to him before, it was a secret for a reason. So I checked his email and he emailed me out of nowhere. And he basically was just like, hey, I don't know if you're ready to talk yet. The way that things kind of ended was not cool because I literally ghosted him. Because I didn't know how to own up to like, just, oh man, I was so driven by my feelings in college. I was like, okay, I can't explain to him why I'm breaking up with him. I have no idea even why. I'm very fearful, and I just ghosted him. Couldn't talk about it, didn't want to. And so he just is like very, very forgiving. But in this email, he's like, are you ready to talk about things like normal people yet? And I'm like, oh, shoot. I'm like, yeah, I totally ghosted you. So we just talked for a little bit over email. But then he ended up flying back to Pennsylvania in like November, and we hung out, and then we were kind of officially dating in November 2018. And I would say he really encouraged me in my faith just in a way that I hadn't been encouraged before, because it was just very personal for him and he just lived what he believed. And he had been very rooted in identity even way before I ever heard anyone really talking about it. He had sent me like I remember him sending me a Dan Mohler sermon. And I don't even think it was at that time when we were dating, or maybe it was. It was probably in like November 2018. And I remember listening to it and being like, wow, that's a really good sermon. Like, cool. And so there were like moments throughout my relationship, throughout our dating relationship, where and like this whole time, I am clearly like not ready to receive it yet because it never landed. And so he would talk about it and I'd be like, yeah. And he would send me stuff and share me stuff. And I'd be like, cool. And so we were long distance for like a year, almost exactly a year, because we got engaged the following year. And then, so in November 2019, we got engaged. And then a month later, we got married. And I know.
I love that.
Yeah.
Like, he's going for it.
Yeah, and so he flew from Arizona to Pennsylvania, and we got married on December 23rd in a courthouse, and that was 4 years ago now. So just like a week ago, a little over a week ago, we celebrated 4 years. But yeah, so we got married, and then right after that was COVID. And that obviously for everyone changed everything. And so at that point I was getting really close to finishing college. By the way, my 2-year degree took me 4 years. Anyway, no shame. I have a degree, but I'm not using it anyway, so it really doesn't matter. So I'm doing my clinical rotations in a laboratory, and they're like, get these students out. So we were out of school. We were out of our clinical rotations. And I'm like, okay, it's like a couple weeks. We're doing everything online. And I'm like, okay, this might be indefinite. And so, one of Jonathan's family members actually encouraged me, why don't you go spend some time in Arizona? Like, you guys are married, you're still doing long distance, because we did it for a couple months. I think I officially moved to Arizona in May, or yeah, I think it was May. But and I graduated around that same time that I moved here, but school was completely online from like January until we graduated. Graduation was online. So I packed some bags and I'm ready to fly to Arizona, and it's been like a year doing long distance, and then we were married for a couple months, and that was long distance. So that was obviously incredibly hard, even though it was short-lived. So I'm like, all right, I'll probably be back soon when school starts again in person. I never left Arizona.
Well, I mean, you're married. Wow, the plan is to just go there and
And like the plan was like, okay, once I graduate, then I'll move. But everything was online anyway. So I'm like, well, I may as well just, spend some time in Arizona and see how long I have. I'll just do school online. It's online anyway. And so I never went back like I thought I would, like 2 weeks later, which is like, okay, whatever, you're married anyway. So it was like, that was going to be my home. And it was cool. It was a cool experience. Like, wow, this is awesome. This is sooner than I thought. Even though COVID just like really threw things off. And so graduation was online, and so we're married, we're newly married, and my husband is so gracious. He would not say the same things that I would about my perspective of our first year being married. But just because of like, I don't know, just because of me. But we like, COVID didn't help. But and like my husband, he had his own business. He was doing contracting, but that slowed down a lot because he was doing commercial and retail stuff, and that just, a lot of those stores weren't open that he was doing work for. So we were both just at home in his aunt's house, keep in mind. So we're living with his aunt. There's other people in the house. We don't have our own place yet. And this was just for a few months, but I started to get back into drinking again. Like, just, I don't know exactly how it started, but it was, I mean, like I said, it was COVID. So we're like, well, there's nothing else to do. And so I really just started, and this was probably for several months, just drinking again a lot. Like I would drink during the day, and just it was bad, because when I would drink, I would get, like I said, when I was living at home in college, I was just mean, and that was something I was like trying to fix in myself. Like, I don't want to be this way, but it was just out of anger and hurt. But alcohol would just make it even worse. And I really like hated who I would become when I would drink. And so like, I really wanted to stop, but I don't know. And so that went on for a while. And like, there were some really good moments, and it was the first year of marriage. So there were some good parts, obviously, but I just like, going back, I would change some things. I would change some things that I did, and the way that I acted, and the way that I treated my husband. And yeah, so some time goes by, and I'm kind of like, okay, this has got to stop. And eventually I was able to just kind of stop again after I noticed, like, just, it took a turn. It was all day. COVID started to, like, Arizona was one of the states that they pulled back on some of the restrictions sooner than a lot of other states. And so I don't know if it was like around the fall. I think it was around the fall. Things started to kind of continue a little bit again, faster than like the rest of the country and the world. So like, my husband went back to working. I got a job doing something that was kind of related to my degree, but not entirely. And we're going to a church, which was closed during COVID. They also opened, I think, relatively quickly compared to some other churches. That was a whole experience in itself, because my husband grew up Pentecostal, Romanian Pentecostal, and I grew up Presbyterian, which is just very conservative. And so the church my husband was going to was just a different world. And it was so new to me that I was like opposed. I was very opposed, very against just what was going on. I'm like, why are these people dancing? Like, why are they so happy? Like, it was just very different. And so that was a hard adjustment for me too, was going to that church. And like, my husband knew there was resistance there. So that kind of put some tension between us. So I get a job. We're going to this church. And things are going okay. I'm not drinking anymore. And then I saw Savannah Louie post something about the School of Kingdom Living, which is an online YouTube recordings of Dan Mohler's School for Kingdom Living that he did. I don't know. It was some years ago. And I'm like, huh. Because I had heard some stuff from Dan Mohler, and I'm like, this guy, like, he's just different. There's just something different. And so I'm like, I'm going to listen to these. And I just started like devouring them. And they're like 37 videos. They're all like almost 3 hours long.
Yeah.
And I just have like headphones in at work. And I'm just like, I remember the first like 15 minutes of a video. And I'm like, what? Like, this is amazing. I'm like, this is nothing like I've ever heard before. Like, everything's been done. It was this crazy sense of like, this has to change things. Like, I knew there was something more. I had hope, but I didn't know what the hope was in. And it was like, so I'm starting to hear this. I'm like, okay, this is amazing. This has to be for me too. Like, this, what I've been living, what I've been experiencing.
And you'd followed Savannah before, just as like
I had watched her on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a big YouTube person, and so I watched Savannah's videos, and then I think she was even off YouTube at that point, but I had followed her on Instagram, so I saw her talking about it. And then I had also started listening to the Death to Life podcast, I think around that time, because she was posting about both, and that was when she got free, and it was just, you're like, this is amazing, and you're talking about it, and so I'm like, what is she talking about? Like, this has got to be good. It's got to be good. And I watched her videos, and like, they were very encouraging to me in the seasons that I watched them, even though she wasn't in the full understanding of everything Jesus did for her at that time. And it's still really encouraging. It's also funny. I had watched Justin on YouTube too for a long time, and it all just like comes together at the end. But,
so you started listening to Death to Life. Did you start with her episode?
I think I might have. Because I remember I don't remember, when did the podcast start? Because they were like some of the newer, like, or the older episodes, like Justin's episode, and
it's like October of 2020 it started.
Okay, yeah, so it probably was not long after that. And so it was the older episodes where I started listening. And so I'm listening to like the podcast, I'm listening to Dan Mohler's sermons, and I'm like, I know that this is for me, but why has nothing changed yet?
Okay, we're going to take a quick break from the episode, and I'm going to bring on my brother, Kevin. Kevin, how long have you been rocking with the gospel?
Like 3 years.
3 years?
Like this gospel truth for 3 years.
What would you say it has done in your life? You say, yeah.
Well, it's not done yet. It's only just starting. But what hasn't it done is a more appropriate question. It's a seed planted, and it's growing and it's taking root. So there's a lot of uprooting that's been taking place, and just unlearning, relearning, and reframing.
Wow.
Everything in my life has to be reframed.
Wow.
From the point of and perspective of gospel truth. I've heard the gospel before, and I didn't understand it. But now that I have a better understanding of it, it literally changes everything in my life.
you've decided to donate of your time, your resources to keep this ministry going forward. Why is that important to you?
It, like, the message of salvation, it's that verse, 2 Corinthians 5:18-19. But all things are of God, who reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. Namely, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against us. There's the key. And having committed us the word of reconciliation, this is our ministry, to teach this to people that to be reconciled. And like, that's it. Like, that's the point, that we are coming back to him, and he's not counting our trespasses against us.
So it's a big deal is what you're saying.
It's a very big deal.
Listen, if you're listening and this is my appeal, I say it every week on here, we want this ministry to go forward. We want people to hear the podcast. We want people on the Bible studies. And you donating, every single dollar you donate goes towards keeping this going. So you can go to lovereality.org/give and partner with us moving forward. We want this message to get out there. And you partnering with us goes a long way to get it out there. So lovereality.org/give. Kevin, thank you so much, my brother. I appreciate you taking the time.
Appreciate you too. Thank you.
So I'm listening to all this stuff, and after that, I don't even think I ever finished Dan Mohler's series. I got to like video like 32 or something. And then I just started to taper off a little bit of the Death to Life podcast, and was just living my life. I quit that job because for not necessarily good reason. I just wasn't being treated how I wanted to there.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I'm not doing this forever. I don't want to be at this place forever. Because also, like, I wasn't officially using my degree. It was only semi-related. And there was a kid doing more work than me because he had more experience, but he's like literally a kid. And I'm like, I just graduated with a degree. And I'm like, you guys don't deserve me. And I quit. So I'm not working anymore. And this is like in the winter of 2020. And then a little bit later in that summer, like we just carried on with life. But in that summer, we started talking about having kids, and my husband would have been ready when we got married, but I wasn't ready. So we didn't start trying for like over a year. And then that took me a while. It started taking way longer than I thought. I'm like, how come this isn't working? Shouldn't it happen right away? It took like a year and a half. And then I started to just like uproot things in my life and like health wise. And I'm like, okay, I got to figure out why am I not getting pregnant? I was like maybe 21 or something, like 21. Yeah, I was like 21. And I'm like, I'm young. I'm theoretically healthy. I should be able to get pregnant pretty quickly. And so like around that time, I don't think I was listening to the podcast really anymore. I'm not sure why I tapered off, but I just was like, I need to listen to all of this. And
when did you show up on the Bible studies? Because that's when I got to know you.
Yeah. So
just later?
It's later.
Sorry, I don't want to jump the gun. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Sorry.
It's later. So anyway, it takes us like a year and a half to get pregnant, almost. And during this time, like I'm focusing on my relationship with the Lord, especially like the Holy Spirit. Just the Holy Spirit starts speaking to me just in more personal ways, and I'm just getting to know God at a different level. So it's like he's still working, still doing amazing things. Like he gave me a few dreams, and the dreams happened, and I'm like, that, like, I never heard about that until I met my husband. He's the first person who talked to me about how personally God wants to speak to you and will speak to you. So I started seeing that happen a little bit, and then we're trying to get pregnant, and then finally I did get pregnant in like December all the years meshed together. 2021, December 2021. And then, then I'm pregnant, and I started to listen to the podcast, I think a little bit here and there. And I would think back to like everything that I heard, or even just like Dan Mohler. Every now and then I would listen to him, but it was just more like, okay, maybe this thing isn't for me, because I didn't see any change. And like these experiences that people are talking about, like maybe it's just not my time yet. Like, I don't know. And so I just kind of carried on with that while still trying to just maintain my relationship with God, because I maintain it so well, and just being good at reading my Bible and all the things. And also, since I was pregnant, like my gears really shifted at that time too, because I was so focused on my health and my pregnancy, and started listening to birth podcasts because Savannah Louie inspired me to have a home birth. So then I'm like very focused on that. And just preparing for that, because I know that's going to be a challenge, and I just want to make sure I'm healthy. And so that was like my biggest focus from during that whole time in 2021. And so it was 2021 when I got pregnant, and then it was right around New Year's. So then it's 2022. I eventually did have my home birth in July, and everything went like really smoothly and really well. And my midwives talked to me about and told me like this was like a textbook case. Everything was great. You did so great. But in that experience, I had prepared for it so much and believed that it was gonna be no pain, and just the curse was broken, and it was gonna be, I just had envisioned this peaceful, blissful experience. And so I go into labor, and my labor, and it was quick. It was 12 hours. So, and that's quick compared to average. So it was quick, but it was all back labor, which the techniques I had practiced didn't ever talk about back labor. They didn't prepare you for that, which is different, because I've heard this from several moms who have had back labor, and it's like the coping mechanisms that work for regular labor don't quite work the same. And I had planned to do it at home, no medication or anything. And so I'm like, wait, what? My back is on fire? So it was just, I perceived it, I think it was the hardest thing I ever did, but the way that I perceived it gave me a negative view afterward, because postpartum, my thought life started to spiral. It was so negative, so many lies, and I'm so vulnerable. I am very emotional. My hormones are everywhere. I was really struggling to breastfeed at the time. It was just so difficult, and I didn't even want to think about the birth experience, even though everyone had told me, everyone that was present was like, it was beautiful, you did an amazing job. I almost was like, but God, that wasn't the experience I prayed and believed for. Where were you in that experience? And for a long time, I didn't even want to think about it or reflect on it. And now, looking back, it just well, he knew I could do it, and he was right there with me. So, I had everything I needed in that moment. It just was I gave birth. What did I expect it to be like, But it was hard in that season. And so October is when I joined that first Bible study, because I had a lot of free time on my hands. I was just nursing my baby a lot, and I was postpartum, so I was resting a lot. And I'm like, okay, I've seen Savannah talk about these Bible studies a lot. And I had messaged her before, months before, and I'm like, are these Bible studies recorded? Because the time zone difference is it's a little early for when I've been getting up, and I always miss it. And she's like, no, they're not, they're live. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I guess I'm just not going to go to the Bible studies. That's okay.
And this is the one that her and I were hosting together.
Yeah.
That you were interested in going to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, so then I'm like, okay. And this whole time, even while I was pregnant, I would share Justin's stuff. I think I probably even shared your stuff, and I believed it was true, but I didn't didn't receive it for me. Like, I didn't receive it over myself. I was just like, cool, guys, this is the gospel. But like, I don't know. Maybe I didn't actually think it was for me. And so like there were pieces of it here and there. But I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just go to this Bible study. And yeah, I remember you putting me on the spot, and I'm like, oh man.
What did I put you on the spot about? Like, who are you?
Yes. Who are you? How do you pronounce your last name? What episodes stand out to you? And have you noticed any difference in your life? It was like, bam, bam, bam. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, yeah. So I'm like, oh man. Cause I even remember going on that Bible study when you started, before you got to me, you had asked a couple other people, oh, I've never seen you here. And you're like, oh, tell me how you found us. And I'm like, oh man, he's calling on people. And then you got to me.
That's scary.
Yeah, it's like, this guy is scary. And after that Bible study, like, I remember I liked what I heard, because I always had. I'm like, there's something here. Like, this is so encouraging to me, especially in that season, because like I said, it was really dark. I felt like, off the bat, I'm a new mom, but I felt like a bad mom. And I felt like, why did my birth go the way it did? Even though, like, looking back, like I said, it went fine. So there were just lies in my head. So many. And I'm like, something has to change, like, finally. And what's going to change? And well, plot twist, the change already happened. Like, I just didn't know it yet or fully believe it yet. And so this time in my life, like this, and it's like, I had heard bits of this throughout my life, but hadn't actually received it. And, so it's like, maybe I wasn't ready to. And then when I actually did start to be like, okay, like, this has got to be for me. Like, Jesus did this for all of us. We are all his beloved. So he did this for me too. And it's mine because I died with him. Like, I'm just going to take him at his word now. And it was at a time in my life that I really needed it. And I was just able to receive it. I was able to receive it, actually. So, I just kept coming, and that was like over a year ago in October. And just, it's encouraged me so much, just this community, the identity that it has brought my awareness to, everything that I have in Christ. Like, I used to live and think that, okay, Jesus accomplished, all he did on the cross, and he said, it is finished. And then I would turn around and be like, okay, what do I have to do now? And now I don't have to do anything. Like, it's done for me. I don't have to perform, and I don't have to try harder. And even though I still fall, or I might believe a lie that comes into my head, like, at the end of the day, like, I know my place in Jesus is immovable. Like, nothing's gonna move it. Nothing I do is gonna move it. It's just, I am actually who he says I am. And that's not contingent on me. That's not contingent on my behavior. And it just, these truths just started to be like, really just wash me and just well up in me. I'm like, okay, I actually can renew my mind, because I had heard that verse so many times. It's probably one of the most popular verses that people preach, is that you can renew your mind. And I didn't know it was actually possible, that it actually changes things. The more that you actually just speak that life over yourself. And so I just started to see things change, especially in my thought life. And just actually believing who I am and all that I was made for. Like, I was made for love. And I didn't used to know that. I never knew that until hearing it over and over again in little ways and being like, okay, maybe that's for me, but maybe not today. And then, like, these Bible studies come around and they're like, yeah, it's for you. Like, this is for everyone.
You've been through, the Bible study that you go to the most is the one that I have on 9:30s on Wednesdays. And if you've been there for over a year, you've been through like the cycle maybe 3 times or something.
Mm-hmm.
But just yesterday we had, because you wanted to know about what happens when you die. And we don't normally talk about that, but we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you've been through it 3 times and you're hearing all of this stuff, you said that while you're not trying harder, there has been transformation in your life. Describe the difference between trying hard for transformation and then just believing what he's done and there being actual transformation.
Well, trying hard, it doesn't matter how hard you try. Like, that's just the thing. It's like you can never get there. You can never keep the law perfectly, and you don't have a righteousness of your own. So you're going to burn out, or you'll do well for a little while. And then once you fall, then it's up to you to try even harder to get there. Believing what Jesus has done, it's you looking at what he's done and counting it as true for yourself, regardless of what you do. And you get to rest in that. Like, it's just a continual reminding yourself, like, I am at rest because, like I said, like, I'm secure in Jesus. I died with him and I'm alive with him. That's where my life stems from now. It's not me trying to get to that thing. It just is.
I pick people for the podcast. I don't know how I do it. But people being there for a while. And I think I've just heard stuff coming out of your mouth that I hadn't heard before. And just a confidence and you speaking life to other people and you coming back, even though you've done this thing like 3 or 4 times, you know that it's good.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I've never, like, and you barely have your camera on. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of times I don't.
But I've seen a change, even though I haven't even seen you on the screen. I've never met you, but I was like, no, she gets this. Just because I've seen the confidence in how you speak and how you minister to other people. And so that has been a blessing to see. And no, I love it. I guess where I want to take you, I'm trying to decide where are we going to go back to old Eden. I guess to this point in high school where we act like that's weird. All of us were like that. Like, we were kids, we needed affirmation. But if you could pull her aside in the middle of these, relationships where you're trying to be loved, looking for love in all the wrong places, you just pull that girl to the side, put your arm around her. How would you encourage her?
I would tell her that that's not where love is. Or that's not what love is. That if you just look up, if you go back to what you heard growing up, even though you didn't maybe understand it at the time, like just Jesus, like it's just Jesus. It is nothing else. Like you have all that you need. You don't need other people's affirmation. You are so perfectly loved. And you never have to seek it elsewhere. Yeah.
That's powerful. Thank you so much. Like I said, you're a blessing. You're a testimony to us. I didn't know anything about your story, and I think it's an awesome story. And I think that you're an amazing mom. I think you're an amazing wife, amazing daughter, amazing sister. And as you just keep on being convicted by these truths and believing it, I think your life, while there may be some hard things, it will be a blessing, and you'll be a city on a hill. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Man, sometimes we don't believe it until we see it, right? Like, that's what so many, like, I'm from the show me state. You got to show me before I can believe it. And if that's where you're at, if you don't believe this is true for you because you haven't seen the transformation, let me, this is for you. Father, I want transformation. I want to believe what you have done, but I haven't been able to because I haven't seen it. But I'm going to be convicted of this truth that if you say it, it's true, that you did it. If you did it, it's done. And I'm going to put conviction on that. I'm going to live by that. And I trust that you will bring the transformation because you said that you would. You said that I shouldn't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of my mind. And so I'm renewing my mind to the fact that you have done it. And I'm praying this in Jesus' name. If you want to kick it with us on Wednesday mornings, that's the Bible study that Eden was talking about. It's called Made New, 9:30 Wednesdays. We just talk gospel all day, every Wednesday. Come check it out. I'm sure it would be a blessing to you. Bye.